Hello everyone, welcome back for another video. Today I wanted to talk about something that's very important that I find myself talking to my students about very often, and it's a bit underlooked, and it's the importance of prioritizing the fundamentals in every subject that you're trying to get better at, whether that's GCSEs, A-levels, or if I was being completely honest with you, any subject that you want to get good at, right? Firstly, let's try to appreciate what fundamentals are, right? So the fundamentals are the bread and butter, important principles that guides how you should think about a particular topic. So if I were to just veer off and talk about, say, investments, a fundamental concept in investments is the idea of an ROI, right? A return on investment. It's very important for you to be able to, when you're assessing any investment, there's multiple different ways you can do it, right? There's like the payback period, the amount of time that it takes for you to make your money back, or there is, the internal rate of return, which is on a yearly basis, what percentage of return do you get on the capital that you invest? But the fundamental idea in investment overall is that you're going to put some money into something, regardless of what it is, regardless of the asset class, right? Be that a property that you're going to get rental income from, be it a stock that you're going to get dividends, or you're going to get some sort of growth, or you're going to start a business, you're going to invest in someone else's business. The idea is that you want to put money in and then you want to get some sort of return on top. And the higher the ROI generally is going to make for a better investment, as is the concept of risk. Now, literally just by understanding the concept of an ROI and understanding the concept of risk makes you far better at understanding everything else in investments, because everything else then, pivots around it, right? In terms of, when you're talking about a rate of return, you then need to understand what are the profit margins and, what is the cost of capital and all these other ideas that really only feed into this very central concept. That was a bit of a long tangent, but the idea is the same in A-levels, right? There are certain concepts that you learn, particularly at the beginning of the year in maths, the principles of algebra, the principles of how you rearrange equations, and how you collate like terms. These things are very overlooked, and the reason why is because firstly, they're easy, right? And secondly, it gets a bit boring to think about the fundamentals because people always like to jump to the advanced concepts. Makes them feel better about themselves to be like, oh yeah, I'm doing A2 content and I'm really learning that. But actually, you get a much better return on your investment by focusing on the first year content than you do on the second year content. I'm going to give you 3 big reasons for that. Firstly, the first year content is a prerequisite for everything that you learn in the second year. Okay? Meaning that if you don't have a 100% perfect grasp of the first year content, you are to some extent hindering your ability to understand the concepts in the second year. And as I said, this applies to anything else that you're trying to learn. And so even if you feel like you understand the first year content reasonably well, it's often a great idea and a better allocation of your resources to further bolster your understanding, to make sure you have a really in-depth knowledge of those concepts before then moving on to the second year concepts, because you're going to be able to understand them better and it's going to take you less time for you to be able to acquire them as well. Okay? So firstly is that they are prerequisites. And I've seen so many students rush to second year. They don't really know how to rearrange equations. And then when things get really advanced, things just fall through the cracks. And now we have to go back and relearn the fundamentals and it gets messy. Okay? The second reason is because those concepts are disproportionately tested in the exam, okay? That is in part for 2 reasons. Firstly, just, as a basic rule, let's say we're talking about chemistry, right? I'll give you one example. Let's say, for example, for OCR, modules 1 and 2 are tested across all 3 exams, okay? Whereas modules 3 and 5 are tested in paper 2 and in paper 3, and then modules 4 and 6 are tested in paper 1 and paper 3, okay? So the advanced concepts are tested in only some papers, whereas the fundamental concepts are tested in all papers, right? This is by design. Firstly, in order for you to be able to, as I said, apply the advanced concepts, you need the fundamentals. And it will be very difficult for them to word questions in a way that systematically gets more advanced if they don't initially talk about very basic things like what are the precursors for DNA, right? And then for them to then build it up, talk about mutations, then talk about evolution. It's a very easy way to build up questions if you can rely on prerequisite concepts. So one is because they're prerequisites, and secondly is because literally the structure of the way that they give you the exam is such that those concepts are tested more often, okay? The next reason for you to be able to understand fundamentals really well is that in order for you to really nail those concepts requires you to do a lot of thinking, okay? It requires you to really get at the meat of what that topic is about, okay? And when you understand them, it gives you application skills that translates across the rest of that subject, okay? So for example, in chemistry, in first year, what you're taught is the concept of nomenclature, right? Like we want to precisely be able to name organic molecules. Then there's a system for how we do that, okay? And if you don't understand nomenclature, you're not then going to be able to name concepts in second year. That's the first thing, right? But secondly, you've just understood the key idea that we want to be really precise in chemistry. We want to be able to name molecules in a way that you couldn't have another molecule that has the same name but has a different structure, right? And so that gives you the idea that, oh, okay, so that means that if I name a molecule, it needs to be impossible for me to come up with another molecule that is different but has the same name, okay? And that's a very useful principle to know. So that was it. I think it's something that is overlooked, as I said, because it's very easy to learn the first year. Like, oh yeah, this is basic, and you feel smart by trying to learn the advanced stuff. But to be honest with you, the smartest students that I know, and just the smartest people that I know in general, understand the basics of anything that they talk about really, really, really well. And then, they might have some understanding of the advanced concepts again, outside the scope of A-levels. You don't need to know every single advanced concept really well. If you know the basics really well, it allows you to acquire advanced concepts much more easily, okay?